If I want to buy, is this a good time to buy? Do I wait? What do I do?
The American dream of home ownership, it remains way too expensive.
So the housing market is stuck.
This is still an affordability crisis.
Are you waiting for the housing market to crash before you buy a home? If so, this video is for you. This is the strategy millions of buyers are locked into right now. By the end of this video, you will be thinking about this in a completely different way. And this could be one of the most expensive mistakes you make in buying a home. And so make sure you stay until the end so that you understand the one thing successful buyers do differently than others. So if you're waiting to buy a home right now, it probably doesn't feel like an emotional decision. It feels rational because you've watched home prices rise faster than incomes for years. And you watch bidding wars turn normal buyers into spectators. You also watch people waive inspections, appraisal contingencies, and common sense just to compete. And you made a quiet promise to yourself, I'll wait for the market to normalize, or I'll wait until it makes sense to buy again. And that instinct feels like the mature thing to do. But here's what you may not realize when you made that decision. Housing markets almost never normalize the way people expect them to. Historically, after periods of rapid price growth, housing doesn't crash, it stalls. Prices move sideways, inventory dries up, and affordability stays strained. And this is why waiting often feels logical in theory, but fails in practice. So take 2013 as an example. After prices rebounded from the housing crash of 2008, many buyers in 2013 and 2014 said the same thing. Prices are rising too fast, this can't be sustainable, or I'll wait for the next pullback. That waiting felt responsible at the time. Prices had jumped quickly and affordability was worsening, and every expert said a slowdown was coming. But what most people didn't know is this. Between 2014 and 2019, national home prices never actually pulled back. Instead, prices rose gradually and inventory stayed tight, and entry-level homes disappeared the fastest. The buyers who waited didn't miss a crash. They missed 5 years of compounding appreciation, locked-in payments, and stability. Waiting didn't feel catastrophic. It just quietly made everything harder. And take another example, 2020. Early 2020 is one of the clearest examples of how waiting backfires, and I fell into this as well. Buying a home during a global pandemic felt reckless. Unemployment was spiking, the economy was shutting down, and the future felt very uncertain. So buyers, they waited. And at first, they were right to. Showings paused, listings sat, and prices flattened briefly. But here's the part most people still don't fully appreciate. Housing demand didn't disappear, it stacked up. When rates dropped and restrictions eased, that pent-up demand exploded. Inventory didn't return, it vanished. But within months, prices surged at historic rates, and bidding wars intensified. Buyers who waited were suddenly chasing the same homes at a much higher price than before. Again, waiting felt responsible at the time, but it turned out to be brutally expensive. And let's take another example, the 2022 rate shock that fooled buyers. When mortgage rates doubled in 2022, another wave of waiting began. The logic was simple once again. Higher rates will crush demand, prices will fall, and I'll wait until sellers panic. And prices did soften in some markets, but inventory collapsed much faster. Why though? Because sellers weren't panicking, they were locked in. Millions of homeowners with 3% mortgages had no incentive to sell. So instead of relief, buyers got fewer listings, worse affordability, and competition for the few good homes left. Waiting didn't create leverage, it created scarcity. These examples all share the same pattern. Buyers assume that fear creates opportunity, but in housing, fear usually creates paralysis. When prices fall, buyers hesitate, sellers retreat, and lending tightens. Opportunity doesn't open up. It actually narrows. And this is fundamentally different from stock markets, where liquidity creates quick resets. Housing is slow, emotional, and deeply tied to security. That changes everything. Let's take a look even further back. Most waiting strategies are built on a single mental image, and that is 2008. When people talk about a housing crash, they're not picturing a normal slowdown. They're picturing foreclosures, empty subdivisions, price charts falling straight down, and buyers walking into unbelievable deals. But here's another uncomfortable truth. 2008 required a very specific set of conditions that largely do not exist today. In the years leading up to the crash, the US dramatically overbuilt housing. Entire neighborhoods were constructed based on demand that hadn't actually occurred yet, not the actual household formation demand. Builders were putting up homes assuming prices would always rise and buyers would always appear. At the same time, lending standards collapsed. Loans were issued with no income verification, no employment verification, little to no down payments, and teaser rates that guaranteed payment shock. People weren't just buying homes they couldn't afford. They were being encouraged to do so. That combination created something incredibly rare: forced selling at scale. When prices stopped rising, millions of homeowners were suddenly underwater, unable to refinance and unable to make their payments once rates reset. Selling wasn't a choice. It was the only option. That's what caused inventory to explode. That's what really crushed prices. Now compare that to today. We are not overbuilt. In fact, the US is short between 4 to 5 million homes relative to population and household formation. And that shortage didn't appear overnight. It built up over more than a decade of underbuilding after the 2008 crash. And lending standards are also radically different today. Most homeowners today have fixed rate mortgages, went through full income verification, and put meaningful equity into their homes. And lastly, they had to qualify under much stricter rules. This matters because it changes behavior under stress. When prices wobble today, homeowners aren't forced to sell. They can hold on, and holding completely breaks the crash mechanics people are waiting for. Another underappreciated difference is who owns a home right now. In 2008, home ownership was heavily concentrated among individual buyers with thin margins. Today, a much larger share of housing is owned by long-term owner-occupants, investors with strong balance sheets, and people who don't rely solely on selling during downturns. That makes today's market far more resistant to rapid liquidation. So when people say, I'm waiting for 2008 again, what they're really saying is, I'm waiting for a housing system that no longer exists. And the longer you wait for that specific scenario, the more likely it is that you miss the opportunities that actually do appear in modern markets today, which are smaller, messier, less obvious, and far more uncomfortable. Next up is one of the least understood housing dynamics today, and that is the lock-in effect. Millions of homeowners locked in ultra-low mortgage rates. Many homeowners have interest rates in the high 2%, compared to 6 or 7% in recent years. That's insane. So selling now would mean doubling your monthly mortgage payment, giving up financial security, or moving further away from work and family. So instead of selling, homeowners are just adapting. You remodel, you add bedrooms, you rent out your space if you need to, and you delay moving if you can at all cost. This is why downturns no longer release inventory. They trap it. Waiting buyers aren't waiting for homes to appear. They're waiting for people to give up something they don't want to lose. But let's also talk about the psychology of when housing prices actually start going down. Even when prices start going down, buyers don't feel safe. It usually feels risky. This is a psychological effect few people anticipate until you're in that moment. The same headlines that made waiting feel smart now make buying feel dangerous. And that's why bottoms are always missed. Not because buyers don't know prices fell, but because they don't trust that the fall is over. Certainty never arrives when opportunity does. And here's another underreported reality of when the market turns down. When markets weaken, lenders pull back, credit score requirements increase, down payment requirements increase, and loan products disappear. So the buyers who waited often find that they qualify for less or nothing at all. Meanwhile, cash buyers step in. Waiting doesn't democratize housing, it concentrates it. And here's the math that most people never do that also makes a big difference on whether you should wait or not. See, waiting feels passive. It feels like you're standing still. But financially, waiting is one of the most active decisions you can make because costs keep moving even when you don't. Most people focus entirely on the purchase price of a home. They say things like, I'll buy when prices fall 10%, or I'll wait until things come back to earth. Every year you wait, several things usually happen at the same time. First, rent almost always rises as well. Even in years when home prices soften, rents tend to move upward or stay sticky. That means waiting often involves paying more each year just to stand still. Second, replacement costs increase. See, construction costs, labor, materials, insurance, and property taxes tend to trend upward over time. So even if prices stabilize, the floor under housing rarely drops meaningfully. And third, you lose the ability to lock in a payment. A fixed rate mortgage doesn't just buy a house, it buys certainty. When you wait, you're exposed to a few things, including future rate changes, tighter credit conditions, and shifting qualification rules. Many buyers who waited through recent cycles didn't just face higher prices, they faced higher payments for the same home. And fourth, there's the opportunity cost most people ignore. See, owning fixes a large portion of your housing cost. Waiting keeps you exposed to inflation. Even modest inflation quietly erodes purchasing power year after year, especially when wages lag behind housing costs. And here's the part that surprises people the most. You don't need prices to crash for waiting to lose. See, if prices move sideways, rise slowly, or dip briefly then recover, then waiting still costs your money. Because while you are waiting, you're paying for housing anyways, just without building stability, optionality, or long-term control. That's why many buyers who waited feel like they did everything right, but still fell behind. They weren't wrong about the risk. They just underestimated the cost of inaction. Waiting doesn't show up as a line item on a spreadsheet. It shows up years later when the same home feels permanently out of reach. And so going back to the beginning, why does media make waiting feel smart? See, media rewards extreme narratives, like there's a crash coming, the bubble is about to pop, or this is the worst time to buy. These stories don't help buyers decide. They keep them suspended, and suspension feels safe, but it's expensive. So what is it that successful buyers do? Successful buyers don't time crashes, they prepare. They focus on affordability, duration, and flexibility. They accept uncertainty, and that's the difference. The real risk isn't buying too early. It's waiting indefinitely. Housing doesn't punish imperfection, it punishes inaction. And so waiting for a crash feels safe because it avoids immediate regret, but it often creates a deeper regret, the quiet kind, the kind that shows up years later. If this changed how you think about waiting, let me know down in the comments. And if you want more clear, grounded explanations of how housing actually works, consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one.